Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life, Dopamine swipe.
What is going on? Welcome back to the 817 podcast. And we have the man himself, the world traveler, the bearded wonder, Jimmy Sweeney. What's up, brother?
I'm back.
Back in action.
I came back.
You didn't decide to, live in a cabin, get off the grid.
Just stop.
You didn't have like the Texas no electric grid didn't prepare you to just hey, we were prepared for this. We did a week without all this. We'll just stay in nature. Yeah, man. How do you feel being back in Texas?
It's good. I mean, it's nice to be back. Yeah, I mean, we enjoy life on the road like that. And so it's been a great way for us to travel during the time of COVID and just be safe, feel like we're being safe and looking out for ourselves and the people around us, and still get to scratch that travel itch that we have.
Yeah.
It's been good.
And you did how many in how many days? National parks?
We did 15 or 16 national park. We were gone for 28 days. 15 or 16 national parks. And a couple of them had to be skipped because we got caught in the Colorado blizzard, because apparently one snowstorm wasn't enough for us. That wasn't super fun. I think 7 states. So it was a lot of fun. 7,000 miles.
Wow.
In the car. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. And the 817 feels like it's, we held down the fort while you were gone, and had a lot of great guests. What is kind of your take? I mean, I know we have a lot to talk about. People are getting vaccinated. You're starting to, I don't know what you saw different from the other states that you went to. Where do you feel like Texas is in the sense of just kind of getting back to somewhat of normal?
It's been really fun to just see people posting their vaccinations. I mean, I feel like the last month especially has super picked up, and we're like a week and a half into averaging over 3 million shots a day, which is, I mean, crazy. Like, it's amazing to see what government can do when it wants to be competent. And that has been really exciting to see. And we're excited to, I don't know. It feels weird to be able to walk back into some friendships and relationships now and figure out navigating how that works. And I feel like that we have been in a great social experiment over the last year, and we're about to walk into probably an even more uncomfortable social experiment over the next few months.
What do you mean there?
Just in that it has felt easy to pick up on missed time with really close friends. And it's felt easy to, still do small talk with complete strangers, but it's like that in between sort of like people you would overlap with at a bar, at parties or something like that you don't know super well, but you see enough that you're good acquaintances with them. And now it's how you been over the last 15 months?
Yeah.
There's just there's not a good answer to that question. I wish that I were better at being a social person to have something else other to talk about than that question popping to mind.
I think what's also interesting about it is I feel like you're now becoming almost selective with what you do. I don't know. I guess it's if you're going to go do something, you're going to do what you want to do. You're going to appreciate the time you do spend your money doing. If you're going to a concert, it's a concert you want to go to. It's a restaurant you want to be at. You're not going to just because some people want to meet at a Buffalo Wild Wings. You know what? I'm good, fam. You guys go ahead. I don't know. And then also, I think what was also tough is because it was such a political climate with Trump and, Biden and the George Floyd stuff, that whole time, you saw the separation of like friends that you're like, it's not worth my time to care. Like, it's not you're a bad person, but I don't need to invest time into. And I feel like I have a lot of friends in Fort Worth and even just as friends in Texas that it's like, I still like enjoy you. But like, I don't have the energy or the time to like pit time into this because I just know where we kind of we split during COVID in a way.
Well, and
I don't know how you feel about that.
It's been easy to avoid those people because you just see what they're posting about on social media and you're like, oh yeah, I'm not your friend anymore. But like you didn't have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
But now we're at the point where maybe more of those conversations actually have to be had. So yeah, that'll be interesting. And yeah, it was really cool seeing what other states are doing in terms of vaccination. We only watched TV in New Mexico like one night, but we saw multiple Spanish language TV ads and how to register for a vaccine. Here's the website. Here's the phone number. I really appreciated that. We drove by Dodger Stadium, which is was being used as a massive vaccination site. It was cool to drive past and see that set up. Yeah, I mean, I feel like numbers wise, Texas is still lagging behind a lot of places, but seeing the dynamic everywhere of like rubbing shoulders with California people who are still saying, yeah, like if I want to get a shot in LA, I can't really do that. But if I go to like the red counties surrounding LA, I can find plenty of appointments. That's something that's not any different from here in Texas. Yeah. So it's I'm excited to see. I think there was an article in the Star Telegram that says they think June, like early June is when North Texas will hit herd immunity. I was reading some information yesterday about how someone calculated and they see like first weekend in May as when supply will outstrip demand. And then the next hurdle is the people that are saying, oh, like we'll wait a little bit to get them on board.
Yeah.
Which Pfizer has the data now to apply for non-emergency use authorization, just like straight up, this is a good vaccine. So Moderna should only be like a couple weeks behind them on that. It looks like we could have an exciting summer. Yeah.
And I think, I know. And I mean, when Biden spoke about July 4th, he's like, yeah, we could probably have some small gatherings together July 4th. It's now, I think it's July 4th, like shake your tail feather, fireworks, barbecue, like let's go crazy, and even family all out.
Even to that point, the CDC recently came out and said fully vaccinated adults should feel comfortable traveling interstate now. We aren't planning on traveling over the summer because we know it's going to be like all out. A lot of people. If you are planning on traveling this summer, like I would highly recommend you go ahead and book that now because it's going to get really expensive. People have that budget they've been saving up. Or if you want advice on how to do a national parks trip, feel free to reach out and ask. But
you also have the, so I finally went to my first kind of in-person school presentation. So I got asked to present at a school in Oklahoma, and I took my car because car rentals are outrageous right now. You cannot find a car. I mean, it was like $400 for 2 days. Yeah. And I had to go to the airport. Like I couldn't get one in Fort Worth. So I was just like, I'll just take my car. But yeah, so it's already coming where it's like, it's getting tight on travel. And yeah, you're right. I guess I didn't even think about what flights could look like over the summer.
Yeah. I mean, Southwest on the 1st opened up their calendar through early November. And we have a couple things that we're going to be doing in September. And it was definitely not the prices that I am used to seeing with Southwest. So yeah, just a little random tidbit, but it's exciting to talk about because like herd immunity is very close to us and we're seeing a lot of economic rebound across the board, both like city, state, and nationally. So all exciting things.
Yeah. Well, let's go talk about the things that we're not excited about, and what a transition. And I think it's the Texas State Senate passed the voting bill Thursday that basically shortens voting hours, early voting hours, doesn't allow people to hand out vote by mail or voter registration stuff unless asked. Crazy kind of other things around watching allowed to happen while people work the polls. And I know there's a lot of backlash from even some surprising people that we weren't, expected to be against it. Things, companies like American Airlines. You said I forget who you saw said something negative about it.
Yeah, Tarrant County Judge Glen Whitley, who we've had plenty of issues with the things that he has done, especially over the last year and a half. But he's quoted in the Star Telegram. He says it's ridiculous. You're going to have to reduce the number of machines. People have to stand in line longer. To him, the goal is to get people to vote. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We've had problems with our electric grid, and they're screwing around with how many machines we can have in a polling place. I was like, I appreciate that you said that. I don't know what action or power he has to work against it. But it's definitely not something I would have foreseen him speaking out so strongly against. Yeah.
And I think it's cool too. Shout out Brian Dixon for being in the paper for kind of telling his kind of side of it, and how really it's just kind of just unfair we talked about this last week when this was happening. But I just think, it's really tough, for people who can't get off of work, needs that kind of time, but then also banning drive-through voting, voting. We should be looking at proactive ways of how do we make voting easier. Yeah. It's just and this is Texas doing Texas things. I don't know how much time we really got to spend on it. It's just, I think it's more cool to see that people like Whitley and American Airlines are trying to stand up against it.
Yeah, I do think there's backlash to come. And we've seen it in Georgia where MLB announced that they're moving the All-Star game. Coca-Cola has come out pretty strongly against it. Delta's based in Atlanta. They've done the same. They've done the same thing. There is potential backlash to come, and that's what we need, because this party is fueled by corporations. And we need those corporations. We need to put pressure on them to stand up and act against things like this. So who knows what will come? Who knows if there's enough backlash to get something to actually happen? But these kind of things need, whether it's Beto or whoever that runs for governor in 2022, these things need to be blasted from the rooftops on every TV screen of this might be how you voted before. You can't do that now. Here is how you vote. Flyer on every person's door in every mailbox about how you can vote now and how you have voted before has changed, because we have to fight against this. And you can't change the rules. You can't take your ball and go home when you lose. They haven't even lost here yet, but they know that that's coming, and they're preemptively trying to give themselves another decade before it comes.
Yeah. I think the tough part where I think the tough part for Texas creating the same ruckus and angst against this, I don't know if it's going to come, because the difference with Georgia is I feel like Atlanta, being its own really large city, has such a historical and influential piece to the national conversation. Atlanta, right? Stacey Abrams turning the state blue, the Senate race that happened. I just feel I don't think a Texas city has the national stance like Atlanta does. Atlanta, DeKalb, we were watching CNN and watching these votes about DeKalb County and all this. And I feel that I just don't know what city stands up.
That was Beto in 2018 though.
But you saw we're not even sure he's going to be running for governor. He kind of came out saying he's kind of hot potato tossing.
But what I mean by that is that all like national eyes were all over Texas in 2018.
Yeah.
Because of, I mean, it felt like Beto was starting a revolution. Like,
oh yeah.
He became a celebrity.
Yeah.
And so I think that is possible here. And whether it's him that runs or somebody else that runs, we know that he has been doing a lot to try and lay groundwork here to replicate what was done in Georgia. And I don't know if 2022 or 2024, or even 26 is when it's going to happen, but the groundwork is being laid now. And we need to speak out and fight against really blatant voter suppression. Judge Whitley would only call it voter inconvenience, which is, good enough to acknowledge that there's something wrong with what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess now we can kind of talk about why this is also important from just kind of looking at, it's not just voting. We're also have this, right. The state not holding up its eviction. The CDC has renewed its halting of evictions until the end of June, but the Texas Supreme Court state guidelines expire and are looking to allow, I guess, if landlords want to evict people, Texas saying, that's all good on our end. Whatever happens federally, like you have the freedom to choose to do that. So, I mean, that's another piece of this. It's crazy how I guess that's going to be the part people talk about. We're opening up. People have held out for a really long time. This idea of evictions. I mean, it doesn't. I don't know what that will look like. But through June 30th, which was originally under the Trump administration, so it seems like I'm actually really interested, like why Texas is not supporting it. Because now they're being that Texas expires March 31st. And we still got a lot of the money that was available to people still not being used for eviction support. So it just seems like, I don't know. I just feel like Texas is kind of past the part of thinking about people and just keeping that power in check. It's just.
That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Like keep the power people in power. And to your point about like it being that June being like an original Trump deadline. I think we've seen a similar pattern with the vaccines where it doesn't matter that quote unquote Trump was the one that did this. Now that Trump is not in office, that goes out the window.
Yeah.
Like Trump could have easily mobilized his people to get the vaccine first. But it became very apparent that he wasn't going to win. So instead, they have leveraged their platforms to spreading misinformation about vaccines. And that's the same thing here. They don't care that this was something that Trump put forth because he's not in power anymore. So it's not his thing anymore, even though it was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
But I mean, this is a really sad thing that, like you said, Texas, and we've seen it with the power grids, like Texas doesn't care about people.
Yeah.
And that's just a really sad and apparent truth that the people in control of the state house, the state senate, and the governorship, they don't care if landlords evict people. And I don't know if there's like a less blunt way to say that, but that's just all of their actions point towards that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something like $1.3 billion of state run rental assistance programs. As of less than 2 weeks ago, fewer than 130 payments have been made to like support for this. So it's just like, I mean, we're also just like,
we have the money and we're just sitting on it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's so
Biden
shuttered venues grant that was passed as part of the second Trump stimulus. So like December 27th, they're not even, they haven't opened applications yet. And I believe it's April 8th that they are doing that. And there's just so much disorganization, and it's so easy for people to drag their feet and agencies to drag their feet on this that it doesn't surprise me that we're just sitting on $1.5 billion that could be paid to keep these people with a home, and we're not doing that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know we don't have to spend too much time on this. I just think that was another example of where we have so many important things to be discussing, yet we're worried about voter fraud that didn't exist. I mean, I was looking at something crazy where the state has spent more than 22,000 staff hours on voter fraud cases in 2020 and resolved just 16 cases, on this witch hunt of finding voter frauds. And like these are, so you have, obviously we have these other things where we have money and resources to deploy energy on. If you could take that staff hours and switch it over to supporting people, supporting people. Yeah. And when Whitley's like, yo fam, y'all getting a little too out of hand. Like that's when,
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about this often. It would be very hard to be Republican. I don't know how you can stick to being Republican right now with just how crappy the leaders that are elected in your party are behaving. It just has to be hard right now. I don't know what keeps you held on, but unless you're just lost in the sauce, and that's also cool, I guess.
Well, as part of the rental assistance, Fort Worth does still have money, and I believe you can go to fortworth.gov to find the portal to apply for that if that applies to you and you're looking for assistance. I do think that's a positive that Fort Worth has done a pretty good and transparent job of doling out their resources from COVID relief bills, and there's still more money out there if you are in search of that, in need of that.
Yeah, I'm looking at Tarrant County is accepting applications for rental and utility assistance. So the county has about $24 million to distribute from the Trump administration's $900 billion relief package that was signaled in late December. People can apply on the county's website or by calling 817-850-7940. I think that's what's so important about local elections and also like county officials. I mean, our county, Fort Worth has done there's some people who would say we haven't done a good job, but I think for the most part, we've done a good job of stabilizing the economy and helping small businesses and people. Maybe we haven't done a good job on the safety and health side as a county, but we've definitely helped stabilize, and we didn't take, if you look at us compared to the other top cities, the dips that everyone else kind of took, I think we held on pretty well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I remember, I know you were not happy with how we handled COVID. But I do agree that we have done a good job with the resources that we've been allocated. And I think it speaks to Fort Worth's local small business culture. And maybe also speaks to how we're closer to being a small town / suburb than a big city. Yeah. Yeah. Well, now that we actually are talking about the county and the city, let's get to the big story. Let's talk about the mayoral election. We had some great articles come out about mayoral financing. We're also, last week we talked about Bud Kennedy's kind of story where there's some kind of opening ups of conflicts that are probably going to start happening. I mean, when people start getting their claws out, this is kind of the time. So, we have also the real legitimate debate or panel April 14th, facilitated by the chamber. You can sign up on the chamber's website, get onto the Zoom link. I know Star Telegram is sponsoring it as well. So I think you're going to see a lot come out, and that's where people are going to start attacking people. At least, I mean, we don't know. I mean, I guess it is a local, and everyone plays friendly usually in local elections, but and they've been playing pretty calm in like the current debates. I watched the transportation one this week, and everyone was still, relatively friendly still. So, but what's your take on the mayoral financing story that was in the Friday paper?
This one I'm referencing is from the Business Press. So April 1st was when campaigns for all elections had to declare their finances, which is essentially how much money you've brought in donations, how much you've spent, which from the start, we have been led to believe that Brian Byrd was going to be the big spender of this election. And that really hasn't necessarily come across. Of his about $500,000 on hand, about $300,000 of that is from a loan from himself. So he has spent a lot. He spent over $200,000 in expenditures. But when I look through his finance report, it is a little bit shorter than what I expected. A number of larger donors, which I think we knew would come from him. But I don't know. It felt underwhelming for what I expected of him. And especially, we only got home yesterday, and so we haven't driven around a ton, but I'm seeing a lot of other signs. And
Mattie's rocking.
Yeah.
Right now. I feel Mattie's.
Yeah. So hers was very interesting to dig into. I mean, she has brought in a lot of money. So currently, total contributions, $653,000, which for comparison, Byrd was next in contributions and he was at $200K, which a lot of that was coming from, it seems like, his smaller circle. But Mattie has only spent, adding these two together, maybe about $163,000.
Yep.
So she's underspent him, but she's got a lot on hand. Like if she wants to go for TV ads in this last month, she could totally hit that hard. It's kind of crazy. I mean, her campaign finance report is about double the length of Byrd's, which the majority of the campaign finance report is listing out the names and address and contribution amounts of everybody that has contributed.
Yeah.
I would estimate that her average contribution is probably 4 figures. Like there are a lot of large numbers in here, especially coming from private trusts and addresses of lawyers' offices, which often facilitate private trust contributions. So it's a little bit harder to dig into exactly who's contributing to her, but I do see a number of businesses. Like I saw our landlords for the theater have given a good amount to her. But just scrolling through, like there's so many $5,000, $10,000, and even $500 where for Zadeh and Peoples, those numbers are $50.
Yeah.
So you can tell where the grassroots in Fort Worth is, and you can tell where the establishment is.
That's what's crazy.
The Bass Trusts are all over. Parker's. I was looking for the Police Officers Association, and I didn't find an address associated with them or their name in here. So that may still be to come. It may just be coming from individuals within the organization. But you have to believe that has driven a lot of the funding that she has. And it's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't understand how powerful how an establishment was until I looked at this contribution list. And like, there's a legit Fort Worth powerhouse. And for me, just being another person on the street, it is crazy how tight that circle is and how tight that circle is around Mattie Parker. Yeah. That's like, it's the establishment has their eyes on who needs to keep up what's going on in Fort Worth.
Yeah. Which all of this is public information, so I don't really feel bad sharing. Names of them. But like Ross Perot Jr., $10,000, a PAC called, it was like Save Fort Worth or Protect Fort Worth, another like $25,000. I don't know who Gary Blake is, but he's given $30,000. Like, that's the level of donations that are all over Parker's campaign. And at that amount of money, there is an unspoken quid pro quo. You know, like there's an expectation that you meet with them or continue to further those agendas. So if we're looking for Fort Worth status quo, like we're seeing them go all in on Mattie Parker.
Yeah. And I believe the thing that got Ken Paxton in trouble doing a benefit for a person, it was around $30,000 the person put in. It wasn't a crazy amount of money. Well, I mean, that's a crazy amount of money, but it wasn't like these numbers are the numbers of where I feel like, you know, you have that accountability in your influence, but also what came out, Bud Kennedy's article about how Mattie Parker's husband is a lobbyist. Yeah. And that is also, I'm interested to see like if any of that, I mean, this is not a national debate or like a national thing. So I just don't think people are going to be cutthroat, but I just think that's also a really heavy hand.
Yeah. I'm just here scrolling through pages of her finance report right now. And I mean, I've gotten through 15 pages. And I believe that I've seen 3 donations under 3 figures, which I can do the same for Zadeh and Peoples. And I can tell you from already having done it that probably 75% of their donations are under 3 figures.
Yeah. And
so you can tell, grassroots versus establishment. And I feel like that's what this election has become.
Yeah. And if you look at and Zadeh reported $134,420. And Deborah Peoples did a little more than, she has more than $41,000 in the bank.
I was honestly very impressed with Zadeh and Peoples fundraising, especially because like Peoples has been a known commodity. We've seen what she has raised in previous elections, and obviously she was running against an incumbent. There was just a lot less interest in those, but she really stepped up her fundraising game from her previous cycles. And she's by far has the most unique contributors of anybody in these reports. I was impressed with Zadeh's. A lot of hers is done by hand, which is having like read through these now, and they're like between 60 and 130 pages. I was like, oh my gosh, like somebody get them a computer, but somebody did. And then they started being done computerized. But like reading through Zadeh's, it's, 200, 250, 500, 150, 10, 25, 50, 25. Yeah. And for Parker, that was 5,000, 250, 1,000, 1,000, 1,250. So that's sort of the disparity that is happening. But there's only a month until election time and all that money is still on hand. Like, what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
That's what I'm kind of thinking. Like, what are you waiting for to really go all in?
It's going to be really interesting. With the new, we talked about Steve Panate and you think, Byrd is getting squished right now. And we love it at the 817 podcast, but you got Mattie, like her ship is coming. And then you got Panate's pirate ship taking some of your people. You're being squeezed.
Yeah, I mean, I think between that and seeing what I would consider a disappointing campaign finance report from him, like, it feels like he's losing his legs.
Yeah.
I feel like his momentum that he had at the start of being like, I'm going to be the one to mobilize the Trump voters. And now he had that really stupid ad with a shutterfly photo from Paris burning, being like, this is what we're going to turn into. Like, come on, man. Like, we're not idiots. This just makes you look dumb.
Yeah. And, and I'm just really, I'm really excited to just kind of see how it pans out. I think the good in all of this is that the fear of Byrd, even though honestly, I mean, Tony, who was on, hosting, he was like, yo, in Wedgwood where he lives, Byrd's everywhere. He's talking about, he's like Byrd is, he's telling me about the Byrd commercials. He's telling me about Byrd little hand. Like he was the first to have it down on the doorknobs, like the little hangers with the marketing. He's like, and you remember us seeing Byrd knocking doors, at Coffee Folk. So it's just like, it's going to be interesting. And also what's cool to know is like Deborah Peoples will be, we're interviewing her for next week's show. So that's going to be exciting, to see kind of where she is right before early voting.
And her finance report is honestly really impressive. Just the laundry list of people that are donating to her. And I mean, it doesn't matter whether you give $2,500 or $25, your vote counts the same.
Yeah.
And so seeing this many people on a list having supported her is really impressive. And I think that's what we were talking before the show of like, where do we see this at? Like, this isn't a race to win on May 1st. Nobody's pulling 51% of the vote. Like, realistically, we're probably going to come down to a runoff of Mattie Parker versus the winner between Peoples and Zadeh.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's really neck and neck. It's just going to depend on who turns out to vote on those days. But for both of them, I think that they've done a really good job of fundraising and of getting people going.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say of Peoples, I'm seeing the least number of Fort Worth addresses. So she, is
national.
Yeah. Mobilized. Like she's, been getting a lot of recognition from PACs and from like national Black Democrats. And that reflects in what I'm seeing in the campaign finance report. And so while she has a lot of names, she also has a lot of names that don't get to vote in this election.
That's true.
So it really for her comes down to how does she leverage all these resources that she's bringing in from outside of just Fort Worth.
That's very true. That's a good point. Yeah. Well, we will see. Looking forward to interviewing her and because we've already had Mattie and Ann, so it'll be really cool to have Deborah. So, well, let's go ahead and get to our wins and losses, man. We are, it's good to have you back and us like just getting your takes on these things, and just kind of having a solid show. I know April 14th is not a Sunday, but me and you talked about watching it and kind of breaking it down. I think that might be pretty cool. Just because I think it's going to be important. Specifically, like you said, it's Zadeh and Deborah and how that is going to work out.
Yeah, which we didn't really even talk about Penate, but man, what a character. I mean, that was just a funny thing to be out and about and then start seeing headlines in the Star Telegram and whatnot about this guy who basically has said, screw it. I don't care that this isn't a partisan election. I am as conservative and right wing as possible, even more so than that guy, Brian Byrd.
Yeah.
And if you voted for Trump, you should vote for me.
Yeah.
So who knows where that resonates and who that resonates with. If I were Byrd, I would take that $300,000 loan that he gave himself and send that over to Penate's bank account and say, hey man, you should drop out.
Yeah. No, I think, you guys know how we feel about the Byrd. So, this is just music to my ears. But I'm really focusing in on where we go from here. And I would feel good about a Mattie, Deborah, a Mattie, and runoff. I will feel really good about that.
Yeah, which even I think it was maybe it was Bud Kennedy. Somebody tweeted out recently, at least while I was gone, that just about the breakdown of Fort Worth in the 2018 and 2020 elections. And realistically, like Fort Worth proper is somewhere 6 to 10 points more left leaning than right leaning. And that's who gets to vote for a mayoral election. So we'll see if that comes to fruition, because traditionally that's not who shows up to local elections. But I think that people have been inspired about and talking about this enough to hopefully get us over that hump and actually reflect what Fort Worth is about.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see. And I love, there was I didn't know if you see the new mural that
oh yeah,
of Deborah.
That was, it was amazing.
Yeah, and I think that what's cool is like you forget that Deborah partnership of during Black Lives Matter, which feels so long ago when we did the road on Main Street. Like I think using that strategy was good. A kind of reminder of like, oh yeah, the person who brings us together. You know, the One Fort Worth motto is kind of what she's going for. So I thought that was a good reminder.
Yeah.
For all of us.
Great callback to that.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get into our wins and losses. Let's start with our losses and then end with some wins. Go ahead. What do you got as your loss?
Yeah, I don't have necessarily like a specific loss, but it was a lot of like bad headlines to come back into Texas too. You know, It's like I've been out and about 7 different states, a lot of more left-leaning states, and everywhere has different issues, and you know, there's no perfect place to live. But coming back to like SB7 and just I don't know.
Evictions.
Yeah, evictions, and still lagging behind on the number of people that have been vaccinated, especially per capita. It was just like, man, like Texas is a frustrating place to live. And even as a white guy, it's an exhausting place to live. And so, yeah, I don't know. It was just a lot of like, I feel a lot for minority friends, and when you have a lot of the time in the car, you get to think and reflect, and yeah, just driving back into Texas didn't feel that fun. To be seeing these headlines. I don't know another way to put it, but it was just like driving back into these kinds of things happening. Just, I don't know. It wasn't fun.
Yeah. And I think my loss is kind of similar. It's the lack of solutions. You know, I think it's like the lack of, you look at what's happening in our schools, and we just don't have a solution on the unfinished learning that kids are going through. You saw like Betsy's idea of, let's just extend
we're just
school.
Throwing out garbage ideas.
Yeah. And it's just like we're throwing out garbage ideas on how to solve things, and then we're not even caring about the real things. We're caring about this voter stuff, and it's just like, I think what's really sad is just like there's no creativity. There's no like, how do we be bold in Texas when we could be, I mean, we're naturally just a great place because of affordability, like that's what sells.
Yeah. Well, and even to that point, like we got stuck in Colorado's like massive late season snowstorm, and we had been in Taos, New Mexico for a few days and had unplugged a little bit. We're just like not as informed and aware as we usually would have been. But this was, a day and a half before the storm started. We're driving into Colorado, and there's just signs everywhere saying, hey, like, be careful, be prepared this weekend. There's going to be very bad winter weather. So we could make a different plan and reroute around to where the storm wasn't. Instead of being in Estes Park where they got 4 feet of snow, we got to find a little niche in the state that was being missed. And that just really hit home of how unprepared we were for what happened and the entire lack of fallout and lack of consequences and lack of results for how we fix it. So it was a very stark contrast and plays to that point of like, we're either throwing out bad solutions or archaic solutions, or we're just completely ignoring it and moving on and not actually doing anything to help.
Yeah.
Like a baseline thing would have just been forgiving electric bills and gas bills for that time. And that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Like that's an easy baseline thing.
Yep.
So I agree with what you were saying.
Yeah. But what's interesting, I say, what's funny is I say solutions, but then I actually would say my win is, I feel like is the federal government is trying to create solutions. And I feel we're trying to spend money on future investments to try to do better. Meanwhile, we complain about it in Texas because we treat all debt as bad debt when there's a difference from, buying a house and credit card debt in your own life. It's not the same debt, right?
Right.
A college degree and, credit card debt are different debt. And so for me, I think what's awesome is how serious the U.S. is about high-speed rail. And I think how much Texas is among kind of the first to be beneficiaries of this. And I think you think about, I don't know if you saw, I think it was Amtrak, and they kind of pitched their vision of what America looked like. And if that really ever happened, that would be nuts. What's crazy is like technologically, it still probably wouldn't even be the most advanced. But the fact that there's a lot of conversations, and Pete Buttigieg and, who's the transportation secretary, talking about modernizing trains, and Texas Central Railway being one of the main beneficiaries of that, of connecting Dallas to Houston. I think that is this idea of taking our big state and shrinking it to be fast is perfect, especially for the triangle. Fort Worth often gets missed on that triangle of Dallas, Houston, Austin.
Yeah.
But I think that's a win for me.
Yeah. 100%. I would be all in on that. And still, like, I don't know that train travel would ever outpace air travel, at least as far as efficiency goes, if you're trying to get from New York to LA. But creating a smaller state, I think, pays a lot of dividends, especially in tourism areas, and especially now that we're in an environment where remote work is easy and accessible, because you can just hop on a train with Wi-Fi and go to wherever you want to go and be working the whole time. Or you can work for a Dallas company, live in Austin, and it's quick and easy for you to get up to Dallas if you need to do something, need to come in for a couple days. I was still living in Florida when Obama pitched something somewhat similar, but wanted to give Florida funding for a high-speed rail that would connect like Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa, Miami. And of course, Florida being Florida, they said no to like $1 trillion to build a railroad. Like, I don't know why. I literally don't know why you would say no to that. But I think that this would be a very incredible and progressive step for the country. And even just the amount of money set aside to maintain roads. Like, the roads in Los Angeles are garbage. The highways are so junky, but how are you going to shut them down? Like, you shut down one lane, traffic's already bad enough. Like, that is killer to them. So like providing alternatives and then actually maintaining the things that we have.
Yeah.
It just feels like it would go a very long way towards making us a more connected country and towards the climate crisis and reducing the carbon footprint, especially that vehicles cause.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And it's also, you're looking at, Biden is expected to introduce the $3 trillion, which is a big, uncomprehendable amount of money. But they're talking about that this could create at least 2.6 million jobs over 5 years.
Yeah. And even I think that like when I was young, somebody having $1 million was crazy, like that felt insane. $3 trillion now is the equivalent of back in like the 90s. When you look at percent of GDP, it's like $250 billion. So obviously the number's really big, but I think our perception of numbers like that is maybe a little bit flawed, especially when we look at it compared to percent of GDP, which is a pretty good comparison of wealth.
I think my other fear of projects is just like how slow we are on getting things done. Like, it's going to take us 30 years to build this thing or whatever, because we're just slow now. I mean, it's definitely going to take some private public partnerships and like,
absolutely.
And some real good, just really strong. Hopefully we're just at speed. I mean, just like this doesn't crawl.
Well, and state governments have to get on board. And that's where the rub comes, is when you have Republican controlled state governments that would rather see a Republican in the presidency
and make this hard.
Then you make it hard. So it's the beauty and frustration of democracy is you got to figure out how to work together. And right now even though this would be highly beneficial to everybody, we're going to figure out a way to screw it up. To make it slow and to get halfway through the projects or a quarter of the way through the projects and then stop them.
Yeah.
So I'm optimistic. I will be optimistic about it. But like you said, we definitely have some hurdles to get over.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is your win?
A couple, maybe one smaller one is just that the U.S. Olympic wrestling trials have been at Dickies Arena over this past week and weekend. And it's great to see Dickies being leveraged for something like that. I was even thinking, like, watching the Final Four games last night.
What a crazy Gonzaga.
What a crazy game. I haven't watched a game all season. And like, we're on the road for a lot of the tournament. I haven't gotten to really watch any. So what a wild game to be able to watch.
Yeah.
But I'm like, Indianapolis gets all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, Indianapolis isn't that cool of a city.
No.
Like, sorry if you love Indianapolis, but like, I don't know, maybe like similar spot to Fort Worth. And how do we leverage Dickies Arena to become something similar to Lucas Oil Stadium and get to leverage all these things or get to attract all of this attention?
Yeah.
So I appreciated that, being able to see Dickies being used for something like that and have a lot of eyes on it, have people tweeting about it. It was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
And then my other thing is that the White Settlement Bridge finally opened like 10 years after breaking ground.
This is a great example, but that's a great example
bridge
of how long something takes.
Yes, for sure. Well, especially when you have people responsible for it who don't actually want it to get done.
Yeah, exactly.
So con there being, why do we still call something White Settlement? Like, we're better than that. Maybe that's something we can get on a ballot to rename that street, that bridge. I don't know if we'll get the entire settlement renamed, but that'd be a good start. But that's really exciting, especially for the businesses over there that have felt very isolated because one of the main throughways into downtown for them has been cut off for 10 years.
Yeah.
So I would say that's a win.
Yeah, for sure. It's also a win to have you back, my man. That was a good episode. Really excited for next week's as we get to speak with Deborah. What are you looking forward to talk to her about as we get early voting starting April 19th?
Yeah, I want to know what her final push is going to look like. What's the plan to get to the finish line? What is the strategy for a runoff? How does that change from what you've been doing now? And what has it been like to maybe be on a little bit more of a national spotlight with a lot of these larger PACs starting to try to elevate you and get you in that spotlight?
Yeah.
I think that it'll be really interesting to see what it's been like going from maybe unknown Democratic chair, unknown outside of Tarrant County, to being a face for a lot of national Democratic PACs and super PACs.
Yeah. We'll definitely see. I know she and her team definitely believes that, they're fighting to get to 51%. But there's a lot of heat coming out, as you saw as we broke down the financing. So looking forward to speak with her, and thank you guys for listening to the pod.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
Now they control your life, control your